Jesse, I appreciate you doing this, man.
I'm glad to be here. Appreciate you, brother.
This great read, I Came as a Shadow, the autobiography of John Thompson, which you assisted with. Explain the writing process for this book, Jesse.
Okay, so Coach and I would sit down for a couple times a week, a couple hours at a clip, and he really had more than games that he wanted to talk about. He wasn't that interested in, oh, I won this game, or when I went into the Garden to play Carne Seca, I set up this type of press in order to counter their, he wasn't with that. He had ideas and themes that he really wanted to talk about, things that were more important than basketball. So he would expound on these themes that were important to him: education, the importance of teaching people, his players, how to succeed with their minds, racial equality and justice, getting equal rights for Black people. Those were the things he talked about, and then I would sort of fit it into the chronology of his career. That's how we went about the writing process.
How long did you say it took for you guys to build like a rapport? Did you have a relationship with him before all this happened?
No, I had no relationship with Coach. He didn't know who I was until I was presented to him as an option to write his book. And he chose me from several candidates. I think he liked the fact that I knew something about the game and had played. His children, who were instrumental in this process and of me being chosen, his children appreciated some of the writing that I had done for ESPN's The Undefeated. And Coach wanted a Black writer. I mean, let's call it what it is. So these things kind of came together and helped me to get the job and for him to choose me. It did take a while for us to build a rapport. He didn't know if I was going to be the right person. And I was under no illusion that if I did not do the work to his satisfaction, that I would stay on the project. But once I started writing it and it sounded like him, and people would tell him, yeah, Coach, that's you. That sounds like you. And I was able to put his thoughts together in a way that was similar to the way he spoke. And I knew that he knew that I cared about the themes that he cared about. I care about all those things beyond basketball. I love basketball as much as anybody else out here, but there's more to life than that. And if we just focus everything on that ball, we're missing the majority of our purpose here. So once those things came across to him and the words were good on the page, he said, yeah, I think I might keep this Jesse kid around for a little while.
How long before his demise was the book? How much was the book already done after his demise or before?
It was done before. So we completed the book about, I would say, a month, maybe 6 weeks before he passed away.
Wow.
Yeah. So everything that you read in I Came as a Shadow is exactly how Coach wanted it.
You talked about how you wanted it to feel like him while you're writing it. What do you feel that you read multiple books, you did a lot of extensive studies. How do you feel, what takes a great from a good autobiography book?
The subject. Coach is a great man. Let's call it what it is. I mean, his accomplishments, the way he kicked down doors for Black folks to walk through, mostly the doors in our minds, man. That was something that he was really purposeful about. And so when you take a life as meaningful as his, and there were so many layers to it that even someone who had been written about as much as Coach Thompson, we did not know. So to me, that's really what makes a great autobiography, is the content of the life that was lived. And so I just had to get out of the way. And also Coach Thompson is a great speaker, a great storyteller, a great communicator. So I tried to just let that flow, man, and get out of the way and help him tell his story.
Let's talk about a little bit of the beginning of the book, which plays a really big part, which I always love about autobiography. I always take the beginning part, the early childhood, as the most important part. He talked about his early background, where a lot of people will place him in a socioeconomic status where low to poverty level. Could you just explain, not a lot, but briefly, how was his lifestyle like growing up?
Yeah. So Coach grew up in the projects, like a lot of us. I think that's another reason why we kind of bonded, because I grew up in the projects too. And so he grew up in the projects with very little money. His mother, despite having a college degree, in teaching had to work as a domestic cleaning houses. His father could not read or write, had to go and work in doing labor from an early age in Southern Maryland, and was not afforded the opportunity to get an education. So they had very little money growing up in segregated Washington, D.C. in the 1940s and 50s. But despite that, Coach Thompson never felt deprived of anything. Number one, he had a tremendous amount of love and support from his parents, and they made sure he had the necessities. But here's the thing. Coach Thompson writes very vividly that he had everything that he wanted, but he knew what not to want. He knew not to want a new pair of shoes until he had a hole in the bottom of the ones he had on. He tells vividly about knowing not to want 2 slices of bologna on a sandwich. And he draws that into a bigger lesson for today, which is we place limitations on ourselves mentally. As Black people, a lot of times, we defeat ourselves before the game is even played. And that is the situation that a lot of Black people were in at that time. He says that they didn't question the fact that his father couldn't read or write. They took it as just a fact of life. And that was the bigger danger in his mind. So those are the circumstances that he grew up in. He had an extremely happy childhood, had everything he wanted, but he also at the same time knew what not to want, and he was living in poverty.
Well said. And I want to add to that because there's a moment in the book where he talked about him being left behind for the greater good, for a teacher who had a better mind frame, and to those of the nuns who looked at it as, no, he's an idiot, and which was not, where the teacher told him, you're not an idiot, you just can't read. Could you just explain that lady and how much she played a significant impact moving forward with his life?
Right. Well, let's start with the fact that John Thompson was one of the most brilliant thinkers to come across the American landscape in the past 50 years. And yet in the 5th grade, he could not read and was told to leave his school because the nun said he was quote unquote retarded. And then this was an all-white Catholic school. He went to the Black public school in DC and had a teacher named Sametta Wallace Jackson, who he credits with saving his life because she recognized his intelligence and his reading disability at the same time and got him help and taught him to read. But he had to stay back a grade. And she said, you're going to repeat the 6th grade. And this is what enabled him to catch up academically. And she also protected his feelings during this time. So not only did she teach him how to read, but she taught him a lesson that he applied to the rest of his coaching career, which was, you got to protect the students' feelings. That's part of being an educator, is to understand that they may feel embarrassed about certain things. So when Coach was at Georgetown, if his players were having academic difficulties, number one, he was the one who would hold them out of a game. So he was decreasing his chances of winning in order to increase their chances of graduating. And then he would say, hey, put a knee brace on the kid. I'm not going to tell you that he's having trouble in class. Like, I'm under no obligation to tell you. As a matter of fact, telling you might make it harder for him to graduate. So these are the lessons that he got from Sametta Wallace Jackson.
I want to say an excerpt real quick, if you don't mind.
Please do.
It's on page 26, and it says, if you want to be a slave, I refuse to be the master. In other words, if you want to allow Georgetown to make all this money and prestige off you and not get an education in return, I won't be part of it. I will put you out.
Yes, sir. What? That's what Coach used to tell his players. That's what he used to tell his players. If you want to be a slave, I refuse to be the master. What? And mind you, like in the 70s, when he got to Georgetown, the schools barely even cared about educating these kids. They had a big scandal down in a school in the Southeastern Conference, which shall remain nameless, University of Georgia, and the kids couldn't read, and we're in a class where the people would do the students in college could not read, but they were passing them along so they could win ball games, and then when their eligibility was up, boom, you out. And so Coach was like, nah, we're not with that exploitation. And even today, people are talking about college athletes being exploited, but that ignores the fact that you can refuse to be exploited by getting something valuable in return. And what is more valuable than an education? And Coach valued that beyond money. So I found that declaration, if you want to be a slave, I refuse to be the master, that's one of the most profound things that he said in his book.
Yeah, because after reading that excerpt, it made so much sense. Because when I was younger, I used to say, well, why Patrick Ewing staying all 4 years? Why is he? I mean, he could have left his freshman and sophomore year. But after reading that, it made so much sense because a lot of people felt like he, I guess, Jedi mind tricked him, like some type of.
Nah, Coach
I'm
felt,
like,
yeah, Coach felt like Coach was torn because he felt like he knew that he wanted him to stay so he could win more games, but he knew that that shouldn't be the criteria by which that decision was made. And so he was really torn. There's a great scene in the book where he's arguing with the agent, David Falk. The agent is like, he should stay. And Coach is like, no, he should go pro. But the real funniest thing was he goes up to Patrick Ewing's parents' house because he said, I feel an obligation to explain to you the value of your child. And the value of the child at that time was $1 million a year for people who had nothing. And this is what he could make. But Coach Ewing's mother, Dorothy, and his father, Carl, they valued education. And so they said that Mrs. Ewing banged her fist on the table and said, Patrick will get his education. And Coach Thompson said that he learned from his friend George Raveling, when you make the sale, get the hell out of Dodge. So he didn't stick around for no small talk. As soon as she said he will get his education, he was like, thanks, Mrs. Ewing. I'm gone. I'll see you later. Boom. And he was out.
I want to talk about another player, Alonzo Mourning, which played a big part because I always wanted to know the story behind this because I heard so many different parts of it. One of it was, let me check. Didn't I have the book here? Young, Black, Rich, and Famous. And this is the first time I heard about this story between John Thompson and Rayful Edmond.
Hey, who wrote that book?
Todd Boyd.
Oh, the great Dr. Todd Boyd. Okay. What's up? Terrific.
The first time I heard it, where he's talking about how he was not a fan of this man. He was not a fan of him being around his kids.
Yeah.
His kids. So he confronted this guy. And, throughout the years, you heard so many different stories of him, those two clash and fighting or having a strong confrontation. But he was able to debunk it, have his own story. How much was that impact getting that story around in that book?
I think this was a tremendous, huge impact of finally getting the real story. Coach Thompson had never revealed what happened behind those walls, not publicly. And, I heard the legend growing up, and I wasn't even from DC. It's one of the legendary tales of sports, period, the time when John Thompson summoned a drug kingpin. We're not talking about dudes on the corner, nickel and diamond. I mean, kingpin, $1 million a week, summoned him to his office on Georgetown's campus to talk to him about associating with his players, and was able to solve the situation. Like, who does that? Nobody but John Thompson. So, the way he tells it in the book is very vivid, very profound in the way that he was relating to this young man. I mean, something that people may not always remember about Coach Thompson is that he was from the streets, from the projects, loved Washington, was always associating with all people from all levels. I'm talking from presidents on down, because every president from Gerald Ford forward, Coach Thompson met him, But at the same time, you'll find him posted up at the playground, just sitting on the bench under the tree, chopping it up. I mean, Coach was really humble, man, about all this. One time we were working together and he had brought like a yearbook or something over that he wanted me to look at. So he's going over there and a piece of paper fell out on the floor and Coach ignored it. I leaned over to pick it up and it was a letter from President George W. Bush. Wow. Coach is just, it was just like scrap paper. I'm saying, yeah, a letter from the president, whatever. Coach was mad humble like that. And so, yet he had, he walked among kings, but had the common touch. And the common touch is what enabled him to reach out and make this meeting happen with the notorious Rayful Edmond that, ended up really saving a kid's career. Alonzo Mourning could have went the wrong way. There were other people involved in that situation who did go the wrong way and who never made the NBA, who should have but didn't make the NBA because they couldn't resist, as Coach Thompson calls it, the call of the wild. So, the fact that he was able to step in there and the way he stepped in was remarkable.
He coached the 1988 men's basketball team, which lost to Yugoslavia, got the bronze. Couple notable players, Mitch
Olympic team, yep.
David Robinson. I think George Raveling was his assistant coach at that time too, under that branch. Did he ever felt responsible of his team being the team that led to bringing back the NBA players?
Well, no, because Coach Thompson's mentors were Dave Gavitt and Dean Smith. And both of them told him before the 88 Olympics, and he didn't say this specifically, but I think they advised him to wait. The writing was on the wall, man. We couldn't keep doing what we were doing with college players. It just wasn't feasible. The rest of the world had caught up to the system that was in place at that time. And so Coach Dean Smith and Dave Gavitt were deeply involved in USA basketball. And they were like, hey, Coach, hey, John, in 92, we bring in our pros, right? So John Thompson could have been the coach of the dream team. You know what I'm saying? He could have coached Michael and Larry and Magic and all them guys, but he felt the call and he said, nah, I got to step up and do it now. The funny thing is that, you know how when things don't get any worse, they give the job to a black man, right? I mean, that's how it goes. Right. And so, we knew we needed to bring our pros. The Olympics were in Seoul, South Korea. In 84, they were in Los Angeles, and they had Michael and Patrick in them, and they blew everybody out. In 88, we had Danny Manning. No disrespect to Danny Manning, but so yeah, man, he did not win the gold medal. They lost in the semis and finished 7-1. The gold medalist finished 7-1 also. So as he says in the book, I lost the wrong game. But I asked him if he regretted doing it, and he said absolutely not. That would be like Ali never entering the ring. He said, sometimes you kill the lion, sometimes the lion kills you. Either way, you hunt. Wow. That's what he said about it.
How was him and Allen Iverson relationship was like? Because a lot of people looked at it as he saved them from the devourer. How did he look at it as? Would he treat him like any other player that came on there, or would he look at him like, I have to save this kid?
Well, Coach didn't believe in treating everybody the same, because he said, I think that's the stupidest thing in the world, because everybody doesn't need the same treatment. So he treated everybody according to what they needed. And Allen probably needed more. I mean, we overlook what a deprived and impoverished environment Allen Iverson came from, where they literally had trouble getting enough food to eat. And then you layer on the fact that they sent this young man at age 17, tried him as an adult for a fight in which no weapons were used, and gave him a 15-year sentence. So he came through all that, and he gets to Georgetown. And Coach Thompson really, in the book, and Allen is the only one of his former players, which include 4 Hall of Famers, to get his own chapter. Coach Thompson really comes off as his protector still to this day. He felt an obligation to protect Allen, to guide him. He was definitely a father figure to Allen. But what really comes through in the book is Coach Thompson loves Allen Iverson. He loves him, and he doesn't love him because he's a great basketball player. He loves him because of the resilience that he showed, because he was able to pick himself up from all of his trials and tribulations and overcome what almost happened to him and what did happen to him. I mean, the boy went to prison at age 17 years old. We would not know the name Allen Iverson today if it was not for John Thompson agreeing to take him on his team, because nobody else wanted him. Nobody else. So Coach Thompson had a very, very deep love for Allen. And not because he was a great player, because there's a lot of his former players that Coach Thompson loved that we never heard of, that didn't average any points, that are not in the Hall of Fame. But, he loved Allen because Allen is a good dude, and I think that's really clear if you look at how Allen moves at this stage of his life, the way he relates to other people, the gratitude and humility that he shows. His real character is coming out. And I think Coach Thompson was one of the first people to really recognize that.
Another part that's highly slept on about his career, that he was actually a Boston Celtic, him being a backup under Bill Russell, won a couple of championships. Explain his tenure there.
Right. So Red Auerbach was Coach Thompson's mentor since high school. Red was from DC. Here's this 6'10" kid who looks like he's pretty good. So he mentored him, and they shared a lot of time together one-on-one in high school. And so he drafted him in 1964, and the NBA was segregated at that time. Coach Thompson was Bill Russell's backup. And mind you, at Providence, his senior year, Coach Thompson averaged 26 and 15 and was All-American. You know what I'm saying? Like, he won a national championship in the form of the NIT, which at that time was a national championship in 63. So Coach Thompson was a great player, but he never got to play on the Celtics because Bill Russell, as Coach Thompson says it, never came out the damn game. And I asked Coach Thompson, when he told me that, I went on the internet and looked at it. I was like, Coach, the internet says you average 10 minutes a game your rookie year, 5 points a game, 5 rebounds. Coach said, I don't care what the internet says. That's a damn lie. Bill never came out the game. And it was pretty much true, because if you look at the meaningful games, if you look at the playoffs, like that famous 7-game series against the Sixers with Wilt Chamberlain, which ended with Havlicek stole the ball. Bill Russell played every single minute except one in a 7-game series. Only came out of the game for 1 minute over 7 games. I mean, load management, come on. So Coach had a lot of time to observe, and he really got his coaching DNA from watching Red Auerbach. Now, Bill Russell taught him how to be a proud black man. He had never seen anybody stand up as a black man like Russell, and he absorbed some of that into his personality. Russ wouldn't tolerate being disrespected or discriminated against. And, that became one of the hallmarks of John Thompson's personality. And Red Auerbach gave him his coaching methods, how to deal with people. Red Auerbach didn't treat everybody the same. He treated everybody different. He said Red Auerbach, if the team was playing bad defense, he would curse out Tommy Heinsohn and then mumble, "You too, Russell," because he wasn't going to cuss out Bill Russell. So all the things that Coach Thompson was criticized for later, they came from Red Auerbach. But they didn't criticize Red because he's a white dude and this genius. But when it comes from a big black man and a big black coach who's unapologetic, it's something to be criticized. So his time with the Celtics was extremely instructive in his racial identity, in his unapologetic stance, and in developing his coaching methods. How could you not soak all of that up from Red Auerbach, one of the greatest coaches in any sport of all time, and not take that over to Georgetown? But it was largely ignored when Coach John Thompson became great, who he got his methods from.
Knowing that the stature that he had, were there any NBA offers for him? The coach?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There was tons of NBA offers, and we didn't really get into the book too much because it's been pretty much covered. And Coach,
right.
At the end of the day, Coach always considered himself a teacher, and
right.
He aspired to be a teacher and make an impression on young people in a learning environment. And, one of the first things he says in the book is, my classroom was the court. But when you're in the pros, it's not really about teaching guys. You know what I mean? And so he had tons of NBA offers. He almost took a couple of them. He almost went to go coach the Denver Nuggets or something like that. But he had lots of other college offers too, for far more money than Georgetown. But I think he realized that his true calling was molding and shaping the characters of young men, and he could best accomplish that at Georgetown.
Last question. To the person who's reading this book, what is one life lesson they can learn from it, or multiple life lessons they can learn from this book?
Right. What Coach Thompson really wanted people to take home, one of the biggest lessons that he wanted people to learn was you can and should succeed using your mind. And yes, we have a lot of these athletic opportunities. And in the Black community, we consider that a pathway out, and that's fine. But you, along the way, you have to use your mind. You have to learn how to make an impact on the world with your intelligence. And he says in the beginning of the book, compared with athletic ability, intelligence places you in a better position for a longer period of time. And so that was really what he wanted people to take away. And that was what so much of his career was about. He wore glasses in order to project a certain image, to let people know he's a thinker. You know, when he was the first Black coach to win an NCAA championship in '84, he said, I wanted to prove that we could succeed with our intelligence. And he also said that he was offended when people asked him, how does it feel to be the first Black coach to win? Because he said, that implies that the coaches before me didn't have the ability. They had more than enough ability. Clarence Big House Gaines, Cal Irvin, John McLendon, but they didn't have the opportunity. That opportunity was denied from him. All of this encompasses his philosophy, which was based on intelligence. That was his most valued characteristic in himself and in everybody he met. And that is how he would want people to think about the lessons of his book. Use your intelligence to do something with yourself in this world.
Well, Jesse, I appreciate you doing this, man. I came as a shadow. I love it, man. This really ended the year out great for me.
Ramon, I appreciate you, and I deeply appreciate your love of books. And Coach Thompson would be very proud to see a Black man such as yourself using his mind to such a great extent. Keep on going, bro.